Welcome back to the Team to Beat Miami Heat podcast. My name is Amir, and for today's episode, I got a special guest joining me today. We got Adele. Thanks for joining me, Adele. How are you doing today?
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me, Amir. I'm excited to talk Heat. Can't wait for the season to come back here in October and get into the preseason action.
Yeah, so before we get started, do you want to let the audience know a little bit more about your channel? You obviously do really good work with your draft analysis. Obviously, you contribute with the Five Reasons Network as well. So I'm a big fan of your channel and obviously the Five Reasons Network. So do you want to just let the audience know a little bit more about what you do in your channel?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me. I mean, my name's Adele. You'll find me on social media channels as Digital Adele. And my main channel is Hoops Profile on YouTube. It's where I do all of my draft analysis, not just for the Miami Heat, but for all the NBA teams and usually up to 60 or so college prospects every year. So I cover not just round one, round two, but some undrafted guys as well, as the Miami Heat audience here will know well. The scouting that arena, and also I contribute, like you said, on the Five Reasons Sports Network, and generally on the Heat Twitter scene as well.
Awesome. Thanks again for being here.
You're
So
welcome. Thanks for having me.
Adele, it's been a boring, slow off season, and thankfully, training camp and media days like a week or so away, and then we'll hopefully have some preseason games early October before the season starts. So can't wait so we can cover some more interesting topics. But again, slow off season, and we didn't really improve the roster drastically. We obviously are a first apron team, so we didn't have the salary space to add any real free agent, right? So the only move we made through free agency is Alec Burks. Our real offseason move was last midseason during the trade deadline, getting Terry Rozier. And so obviously the front office thinks we have enough. We're going to run it back. All of those Miami Heat sayings, and they're hoping to bank on health for the first time in maybe 10 years. It feels like we've been injured every single season, dating back to when we had Dion Waiters and, an older D Wade during his farewell tour. So if we're healthy, then we could compete. And obviously, we have Jimmy Butler in a contract year, and we have Bam Adebayo, obviously improving and ascending with his Olympic tour, and then him obviously adding that 3-point shot. So, what's your outlook for this Miami Heat team? Even though we didn't make a lot of moves outside of the draft and adding some undrafted players, do you think this Miami Heat team can contend with the top four teams in the East, or do you think we're destined to be a play-in team once again?
So, I mean, I look at it in a different light. I think the Heat are always able to compete in a way. Even if they're a play-in team, they're dangerous, as we've seen in years past. It all is going to come down to health, as you mentioned. Is Jimmy Butler going to be able to stay healthy? Is Hero going to be able to stay healthy? Um, and I think a big thing to watch out for is Bam Adebayo coming off of that Olympic run. All the players that typically come off of those Olympic runs have a bump the following years. The question is, how long is Bam Adebayo's do it all defensively prime that he's in going to last? Because he's in his prime now. And if you look at the Heat statistically, they actually were near the bottom of the league in points per game scored, but they were near the top of the league in 3-point makes and 3-pointers taken. You would think they would be worse than that, right? The big issue is they're scoring in the paint and in the mid range. Jimmy Butler not being right contributed to that. Tyler Hero not being very efficient once he gets down there contributes to that.
Yep.
And then if you look at the Miami Heat, they're near the bottom of the league in total rebounds as well.
Yep. Big issue.
It's a huge issue. And so I think some of the losses, like Caleb Martin, I don't think they're going to be as big as people realize. Like Nico puts up almost the same numbers as Caleb did last year. Not in his Eastern Conference title run, what have you. But just last season, if you look at their numbers, they're almost identical. Field goal percentage, points scored, 3-point percentage, rebounds per game. And you would expect Nico to take a jump in terms of his rebounding per game, his efficiency, his shooting. So I think they're going to be able to be competitive. The question is Jimmy can stay healthy at 36 years old.
Yeah, Nico only played 19 minutes per game. Also, how many minutes did Caleb play? Like 24 or so. So
Like
like you're
24, 27. Yep, something like
yeah.
that.
So Nico was playing in that limited role. Like he would obviously start, but
Right.
and play like 6 minutes or so, but he wouldn't get much time throughout the game. He didn't really close either. I don't believe. Did he?
Right, because you're forgetting, Jaime Hawkins Jr.
Right.
ate a lot of those minutes. He started to close more towards the end of the season because he was their only 3-point threat at one point. And, you had no hero, you didn't have Duncan because his back. So Nico was really their only 3-point threat, and they were running a lot of those floppy actions, pin downs, and a lot of those 3-point shooting, dribble handoffs with Nico because he was their only 3-point shooter at that point. So Jaime Hawkins Jr. too, coming off of his Olympic, activity, is he going to take a big jump? He was one of the most impressive guys, him and Cooper Flagg, who's going to be in the 2025 draft. All the veterans from that Olympic team said they were the two most impressive players that were on that select team. So, I mean, I'm actually really curious to see what kind of jump Jaime Hawkins Jr. can take.
So what do you think about the Jimmy in a contract here? So there's obviously his availability issue that Pat mentioned, and Jimmy he wanted the extension. We said we'll take a wait and see approach, which I thought he would get disgruntled, but he said, okay, that's fine. I'll bet on myself because he wants now not just an extension, but he wants a full max. He wants to most likely opt out or not pick up his player option after next season. And he wants to get that, $50 million per year for 3 years, I would assuming that he's probably going to play till age 38. So I would assume he's going to want a 3-year 150. And I don't know if the Miami Heat are going to be able to afford to do that because they would potentially have to mortgage their future to a certain degree. And I don't think it's going to be the same as the Kyle Lowry contract because his was obviously less. He was making $30 million per year
Right.
at age 35 to 38. And I think Jimmy's a higher caliber player than Kyle, even though he did have that championship run, but still they're not the same type of player. I think Jimmy is considered at least a playoff superstar, not a regular season. So he doesn't give that regular season max effort. So it's going to be an interesting year to see what happens with Jimmy Butler because if he does have a really good run, plays let's say 65 70 games, but plays fully and doesn't load manage in games where he's taking under 10 field goals per game and being super passive, not getting to the free throw line, we'll see. Like I don't think we're going to be willing to give him that offer. He's going to have to test free agency, and I think we would probably lowball him and have to lowball him and give him that kind of DeMar offer where he got 25 mil per year over 3 years with the Kings, which is 75 million. I think that's more realistic of what he should get. But do you think there's any world that like this could be Jimmy's last season with the Miami Heat, like whether he plays good or not?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that. I mean, it's not a far stretch to see that Jimmy once paid, and when Jimmy once paid, like you get some of the antics. Like I don't think you'll get that many antics because how much he respects the Heat organization and the 5 reasons guys they touched on. Ethan touched on it a lot. Like the historical numbers of guys over 36. Like
Yeah, I saw
it's
that.
not going to get much better in terms of like his scoring output, but I think he can be more efficient and impactful without necessarily having better stats. The question is going to be his availability, right?
Yep.
And if he's available in the first half of the season and they're playing well, I think something gets done after the season. If he's not, could I see him not being here? Absolutely, because he's going to want paid regardless. Jimmy's not going to come back and be like, yeah, I'll take a mid-level exception
Right.
because I didn't play well. So there's just no version of that happening to me. So I could very well see it going either way.
Yeah. So this could be very well the last year of the Jimmy build and the run it back core, which is running it back with Tyler. As Ethan said, running it back means Tyler's still here. So Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam, this could be their last hoorah potentially. And so
Run it back harder.
yeah, exactly. So with the possibility of this being the last season. So if the Miami Heat are healthy, which I think would be a huge factor, they're only 3 games or so out of like the 4 seed or whatever it was. And there's a lot of games again where Tyler was out, Jimmy was out, Caleb was out, Haywood, everybody was hurt. Basically, Terry Rozier at the end of the year, Duncan Robinson. So with the infusion of these young assets that we added through the draft, and obviously you mentioned Jaime, we're hoping him and Jovic have some sort of leap. Do you think players like Kel'el Ware and the undrafted guys like Kashad, Josh Christopher are going to have an impact where we can actually make a deep run in the playoffs?
So that's a very complicated question because of the number of players that you mentioned, right? Because you still have Duncan. If Duncan's healthy, he's going to be a big chunk of the lineup. In the playoffs, if it does come playoff time, Alex Burks is going to get playing time typically over a lot of the younger guys. He shoots 40% from three for his career, and in the playoffs, he plays even better typically. So Kel'el Ware is very interesting. I mean, he can back up Bam. Can he play with Bam this season? I don't think so. He's got a lot to clean up mentally. He's got a lot of physical things he needs to clean up. He needs to get stronger in his lower half. He needs to show consistent effort, running the floor on every play, hustling for rebounds, boxing out, all that stuff. You know, he has the tools. He's got all the tools. He's a steal of a player for the athletic profile he has, the wingspan, the height, the athleticism, the touch around the rim, because he's got beautiful touch around the rim, all of that stuff. But to see playing time with the Miami Heat, he's going to have to show he can play more than just drop coverage on defense. He's going to have to be able to play level. He's going to have to be able to hit some shots, or Bam's going to have to take more threes if he's ever going to play with Bam. So I just don't see him playing with Bam. He'd have to back up Bam. Now, could that be an upgrade over Kevin Love? Absolutely. Kevin Love only averages like 5-6 rebounds per game at this point in his career. Kel'el could average 10. Just on talent and length alone, he could average 10 rebounds per game. He's that athletic. But is he going to be able to stay out of foul trouble? Is he going to be able to stay on the floor? I think Pelle Larson and Kashad Johnson are really interesting because both of those I could see having paths to the floor, but not until like injuries happen, right? Because Kashad Johnson is a potential better version of Locksmith. Not saying he's better right now, but his potential is higher. His ceiling is higher than Alex and instead of Highsmith over Highsmith. Pelle Larson, man, that guy's a player, an all-around player. His physicality in Summer League, his ability to guard 94 feet, willing passer, willing scorer, inside the paint, outside the paint, at the foul line. He needs to work at getting better at shooting on the move, but he's a player. But again, he's not going to see meaningful time unless people have off days or there's injuries, which this is the Miami Heat, so, likely to happen.
Yeah, I like Pele's game too because he's like he reminds me of Jaime in terms of like his off-ball skill set. Like he doesn't need the ball in his hands necessarily to be a good contributor offensively. Like I feel like Jaime did a really good job, obviously in the post and in the mid range. Obviously, he had that amazing footwork, and I think his strength, though, Jaime. Speaking of Jaime, was like that weak side cut and all the backdoor cuts he would do. So I think in Pele, if he comes in and gets some time, obviously he's going to have to be more of a catch and shoot kind of 3-point shooter, and he can put the ball on the floor a little bit, but we haven't seen that against real NBA talent. So I'm hoping he does get some time, but again, it's gonna be contingent on injuries because we're really deep. Like that's one thing that does
100%.
excite me about adding these younger guys is that we do have a lot of depth because Jay Rich, again, when he's healthy, he's gonna play. He's a good two-way player. Alec Burks is gonna get some run because he's a good veteran player off the bench who could shoot. Duncan, again, if he's healthy. And then, of course, Kevin Love was mentioned that like he might be backing up Bam ahead of Kel'el. Like I'm sure Kel'el will get some time, but
He'll
Jimmy
start the
plays
season
well
ahead
with
of him.
Kevin. Yeah, he'll
I'm
start
sorry,
the
I
season
mean,
ahead of him. So, do you think Spo will give though out of all those players? I'm assuming Kashad and Kel'el will probably get more of the time. I don't know. I think Kashad, in my opinion, might get more time over Pele at first. But do you see Kel'el? I don't know. Yeah, you can. Let me know your thoughts on that. But do you think Kel'el will actually be in the rotation, like to begin the season, like where he'll get at least like 10 or 12 minutes? Like him and Kevin both will be kind of coming off the bench. You got Haywood too, like, and you got Jaime. Like, those are a lot of guys that could get
Terry
playing time
Rozier.
behind Bam and Jimmy. Right.
And Terry Rozier as well. So I don't know where the minutes would come from. So I don't I think it's going to be one of those deals where Spo, if everybody's healthy, will give them like the veterans rest days. So like on a back to back, for example, Kevin Love would have the day off.
Yeah.
Kel'el would get some run, or Highsmith would get a rest, or Jimmy would get rest, and then the rotation would change, and one of those guys gets put into the rotation. So, if everybody's healthy, like you said, this is a very, very, very deep team. I just don't see where the minutes would come from. One thing about Jaime, the reason why he was able to play so much, he only averaged 1.5 turnovers per game as a rookie. That's the reason why he could stay on the floor. He wasn't in foul trouble, and he doesn't turn the ball over. Kel'el, I don't trust to stay out of foul trouble. I don't trust him not to turn the ball over. Pele's good, right? Off the ball, triple threat position. He can, square up, decide to shoot or drive. When he handles the ball against NBA caliber ball pressure, he's not there yet. His handle's not tight enough for that yet. Even in summer league, you saw him in some situations when he's handling out above the 3-point line, he gets his pocket picked. It's just a different level of quickness and defensive acumen at the next level. So Keshad can't really handle it all, so he would definitely be like that undersized 4 Caleb Martin type spot, and you don't know if his jump shot's going to translate at this level yet consistently either. So I think their path, though, a lot of playing time is going to be predicated on injuries.
Yeah, I mean, Keshad also reminds you kind of like that PJ Tucker, but PJ developed that corner three
right
over time, and then he eventually developed that push shot because he wasn't obviously ever a good ball handler. So I think Keshad could be kind of like a Andre Iguodala, Sean Marion type of guy. Obviously not from the onset. Like it's going to take time to
I was
become
going to say
those type of guys, but
Iguodala
he's
could
going to need to
handle.
be.
Iguodala had handles,
He had that in
even
his,
early.
Well, I mean,
Even
I don't want to compare the two Wildcats because he was obviously a first round pick, right? Versus a guy who went undrafted, but he could fit that. He could become that type of player. I think putting him in the dunker spot or even spotting up in the corner, like they're going to force him to shoot threes. Obviously, they're going to play off of him, but his skill set obviously is going to be on the defense. But if you have him in with Jovic, that's where you have that young athletic speed where Jovic is going to, off the rebound is going to want to play in transition, and having a Keshad with him running down the lane or playing in the dunker spot could be interesting moving forward. But my next question for you though, real quick though, is so we all assume Jaime is going to take that leap and he's going to be that person that comes off the bench and is our sixth man, who's obviously trying to get better at 3-point shooting and being a better 3-level scorer. And then of course mentioned recently he wants to be top defender, guarding the best defenders, night in, night out, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. But outside of him, who we project to take the biggest leap, who else do you think will, outside of maybe Jimmy also in a contract year or Bam, obviously, who do you think else is going to have the biggest leap next season for the Miami Heat?
So that would have to be the most, because the next most talented person would be Terry Rozier. If Terry Rozier is fully healthy over that neck injury and he's got a full off season in the Heat program to be in Heat shape, and to fit in with the system and be able to learn where he's going to want to get his shots and how he's going to get his shots, it'd be Terry Rozier. I mean, that guy can flat out score the basketball. He can handle. He's probably got the best handles on the team. He can facilitate a lot better than people realize, and he's a lot better shooter than he showed early in the season with the Miami Heat. A lot of people don't understand as basketball players, when you go into a new offense and you go into a new situation, where you get your shots and how you get your shots is really important because it changes depending on the offense that you're in and the people you're playing with. So for him coming in January, trying to figure out where he was going to get his shots, as soon as he started getting comfortable and figuring that out, that's when he got injured. So I think he comes in off the bat. I think he's going to take the biggest jump out of all those guys. Hero, I think he's at his ceiling. I think he's going to be fine if he's healthy. He's going to be a fine player, but I don't see his ceiling much higher than he already is, in my opinion.
At least within the confines of his role, right? With the fit he plays well with Bam to a certain degree. Like they do all right in the pick and roll, but I just don't think him and Jimmy have fit really well together. And I don't know. He's our third option. I think he's hit the ceiling, and I mean I don't see him being a second option on this team or even
Right.
drastically improving if he had the ball more in his hands, unless he becomes more of a efficient 3-point shooter and actually tries to get to the free throw line and play through contact, because he typically doesn't play well against lengthy defenders or stronger defenders. He relies more on that mid range, the three, and the floater, which has gotten him in trouble, and that's how he had that ankle injury against the Memphis Grizzlies. Like he doesn't play well through contact. He gets blocked at the rim a lot when he gets to the paint.
Right.
Like he can get to the paint to a certain degree, but not as good as Terry Rozier. I think Terry Rozier is probably our best 3-level scorer right now. And so I agree. I think Terry has the best opportunity. His first month, he was just trying to assimilate and fit in, and just delineate. Like he was just like, all right, this is Jimmy's team and Bam's team. Like I'm just gonna pass. Like until Jimmy got hurt, until Tyler got hurt, that's where he started getting more comfortable and putting up more shots. And he wasn't shooting the best and wasn't in rhythm, but the last few weeks before he got hurt, he was averaging like 23, 24 points per game for like a 2-week span, shooting lights out from three. So I agree. I think with him getting a full, well, again, he's been hurt with that whole Nick injury, right? Like he just mentioned, he hasn't even played full 5-on-5, which sucks. He hasn't been able to fully work out this off season like other
Right.
players, but there's still time. There's what, a month ish, I think, like 5 weeks till the actual season starts, to the 26th of October. So hopefully in the next 5 weeks or so, he'll get to play with his teammates, get a full training camp in his system, and I think it's going to be a lot better now that he's been with the Miami Heat for a longer period of time. He only played 31 games with the Miami Heat before the injury and missing the playoffs. So I think he needs to take the biggest leap outside of Jimmy, I think offensively, out of our starting lineup, because I still think Bam maybe might average 2 more points or so if he starts taking, 4, 5 3-pointers per game, which I hope he does, because he was taking, like, after the All-Star break, 2 or 3 per game and was shooting like high 30%. I don't see him taking 6, 7, 8 threes per
No.
game, right? So as long as he starts taking some of those corner threes and not just the above the break three, I could see
Right.
Bam averaging a couple more points, maybe a couple more assists per game, because we don't have a true point guard. But I think Terry does need to kind of take the reins, because we still think Jimmy's gonna, you know, not be as aggressive during the regular season. Because if he
Right.
wants to be able to be playoff Jimmy, he still can't go full throttle and take 25 shots per game during the regular season if he wants to be playoff Jimmy. He knows his body better than us. Like that formula kind of was working for him.
Right.
Injuries have been the real excuse that has derailed almost every playoff run that we've had, which is unfortunate. But we'll see. Injuries have been the biggest plague, and if we could be healthy, and if, like you mentioned, if Kel'el can, get some time in the rotation and play better defense outside of the drop and be a good rim protector and somehow find time with Bam, that's gonna be huge, because Bam can then be that roamer and that free safety and continue to be, unfortunately, our best point of attack defender outside of Haywood now. Um, we'll see what happens, but I'm optimistic. I'm excited for the season. We'll see what happens. But anyway, before we hop off, Adele, just want to thank you again for joining the show today. And do you want to remind the audience again where they can find you online?
Really appreciate you having me on, Amir. It's been a blast, and yeah, you can absolutely find me on all social media channels at Digital Adele. You can find me on YouTube for all of the draft analysis for the 2025 NBA draft coming up. We'll be starting that as soon as the college season gets underway at Hoops Profile on YouTube. So it's just Hoops Profile, just like it sounds, on YouTube. So I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks, Amir.
Thanks again.
You're welcome.